just from a statistical point of view, Netflix grew by 38 million customers in 2020, right? They're well over 200 million.
This is Advertising in Africa with Dele Udugbemi on Africa Business Radio.
Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Advertising in Africa with me, Leo Burnett. Today I have with me Bukola Akingbade, who I would, in trying to, talk to you about her, like that would take the entire 30 minutes. So I'm going to be as short as I can because her background has kind of like evolved from contemporary advertising, which maybe we even double back a bit. She actually is an architect, but I'd moved into contemporary advertising, then the specialized area of digital, and then even a further specialized area of gaming. And, that's why I thought our expertise is going to be very helpful for the topic we have today, which is about the platforms being here. And just off, line, we were talking about platform tend to be like streaming and so on because that's mainstream. And I was thinking, no, maybe I can still draw her into what she's doing now every day now, which includes gaming. So, Bukola, thank you for coming.
It's an absolute pleasure, Dele, as always.
Today we would talk about a new, it is newish. It's come off digital media, so to expand into what is now known as the platforms, the way the audience now consume. But I would like, first going in there, that you first share your background, and particularly in the way I've described you, you've almost kind of taken advertising to be the top, and you've done a PhD now. You've done the first degree, the master's in a smaller way, and now you're doing even a smaller dive into gaming as a specialty. So if you could please just take us through what that journey has been.
Absolutely. Thank you. So my background, I studied architecture. I realized kind of earlier on that I wasn't going to practice, but I absolutely loved the whole design thinking side and problem solving side of that. And I came across an article then in Time magazine that spoke about the cross-section of advertising and architecture. And so obviously my mind kind of got drawn into that. And of course, if you have African fathers like we all do. But there's no way I was going to tell him I wanted to do advertising until I finished architecture, and then I went for my postgraduate degree in advertising. After that, I actually got into advertising in digital. But prior to that, because of my advertising degree, I spent a lot of time. I spent about 18 months kind of really fully consuming almost any kind of literature around advertising. Positioning at the time was a big deal. Truth, Lies, and Advertising is one of my best books by far. I do quite a lot of thinking around challenger brands and how that's embraced, etc. And I got into digital marketing in the UK at the time with Carrot and iLevel, who used to do kind of all the government marketing, which is the biggest spenders in the UK. And I moved back end of 2008 and started, Bytesize in 2009. Then 2016 started Nucleus Digital Agency, and now, of course, I founded Kucheza Gaming, which is a video games company.
That was the one I couldn't get.
For K-12, so that's 6 to 18-year-olds. That's my journey.
Okay. Especially now onto the platforms, it just, in my view, just landed on us. Like with all kind of evolution thing, broadcast was the direction, so you were thinking making a placement, and also on the advertising side we could look for commercial breaks, and now all of a sudden the platform came, and with that, 0 commercials, and then you'd be like, gosh, I need another job. And every time you trace like the Netflix journey, out of YouTube and all that, it just kind of seemed like something that grew organically. But the reality is, this is 2021, and we've gone through 18 months of pandemic that made a lot of people be at home. And a lot of what was reported back in terms of what people saw was certainly a lot more to do with those platforms than had to do with the broadcast media. Exactly. So the reality is here. My interest is, how does it impact advertising? Because it's almost like by design, it's not inclusive of advertising. So what's your view on that?
So I think it's one of those things that we've all kind of seen coming down the line, and It's once we had, as individuals and as consumers, once we had access, to platforms that allowed us to create, it was no longer, that I needed to wait for someone else to create content for me and, the whole sitting around the TV, etc., etc. And in today's world, it's clear for all brands, it's clear that our customers create a lot more content than we do. That's the first thing. And that's the basis of a platform like YouTube. And YouTube, I believe, has paid out about 30 billion over the last 3 years to its creators. They have about 2 million creators that are paid through the platform. Mm-hmm. And that should kind of show you the scale. And, these are not professionals, so to speak. And, we've all seen the rise of influencers. There's a meme that keeps going around, influencer in Barbados, agency, can't even get an Uber. Anyway, so that is what we've seen just by virtue of the access we as individuals have to those platforms across the world. And for a long time, as marketers, we've been told, and we know from the data, that we can't keep interrupting. As a consumer, I hate being interrupted during I'm a big fan of series I watch. I'm a big fan of DSTV, by the way, which I know a lot of people have kind of moved off. But anyway, so I don't like being interrupted. Mm-hmm. And the reality is I expect that other people don't either. Then you get into ad blockers, you get into the change in data from a GDPR perspective in terms of also what Apple is going to do. I think they've done now, turning off the cookie elements and those kinds of things. So it starts to beg the question, what as advertisers are we going to do in this new world? And of course with COVID and everybody got shut down, just from a statistical point of view, Netflix grew by 38 million customers in 2020, right? They're well over 200 million, but they grew by 38
already,
million. Yeah. Disney Plus was launched, I believe, November 2019. Just before. 113 million users.
And they're primarily US.
Exactly. Exactly. And they pulled some of their content as well, if not all their content.
They did.
Which is the universe of Disney, the universe of Marvel, the universe of Star Wars. And so it's the whole thing. And to the point, whoever owns the content, so to speak. Right, is what people still kind of try to find. Is we're looking for, I'm here, I'm a Billions lover, anywhere Billions is, I will watch it, And so this is what we're starting to see. Statistically, they say, although there are lots of different platforms, they say that 75% of consumers only focus on the top 5. So we don't normally go. And that's the problem I see at the moment with platforms, because as a consumer, I don't want to have multiple paths. I want a more unified view, which traditionally was what we saw in terms of networks, right? And I do think that we still need to get to that place.
Probably
go back. Whether that is going to be owned by, let's say, telcos, as an example, or owned by content owners who then have collaborations, which we're seeing. There's some networks kind of partnering with other content providers to unify that content. And so we might start to see that. But from an advertising point of view, and I'll use the US market as a good example, connected TV. So the TV, the traditional TV, linear TV, is not what the trend is like anymore. So the smart TVs, and of course with all the dongles, if I tell you a funny joke about what my brother calls the Fire Stick, he calls his Ikpaino. For now, let's leave all the Chromecast elements. Anyway, so in that world, they say in the US as an example, I think about 60% of all content consumed is not TV content or linear TV content. It's from those apps, it's from those platforms, it's from the Netflix, the HBO Max, it's from the Disneys and all that. And I think as advertisers, a lot of things we're seeing is the collaboration of advertising companies with the owners of those, like with hardware manufacturers or OEMs and stuff like that, and certain collaborations that exist in that space. And I think that is one of those things we'll continue to see, because those platforms also have the data of consumption in terms of behavior. They know what people watch, they know when they watch, they know, so there's a wealth of data there that you can then build on. But I think more importantly, as a consumer and as an advertiser, a marketing person, I think that content ownership is where we also need to go.
That's a huge debate, because the other side of that is measurement. When you run a 60-second ad or whatever the days of people meter, you could check, the reach, the extent to which it was consumed and all of that. When you read brands into scripts, when you get into the famous branded content, all the fancy words and all of that, Fact is, it can be missed. If fear, not necessarily true, but it can be missed because it's not scheduled. There's nothing that builds you up to, no, hang on, a Pepsi billboard is about to show up over there. And if you don't watch it because of Pepsi billboard, you obviously can miss it. So I think that's the dilemma, where to your earlier point that interruption-based advertising isn't the future.
Exactly.
And now that the digital world has brought us into this era of measurement that is virtually accurate and timely and all of that, obvious what is the future of television is also something that would need to deliver on that. So when you look at the YouTube model, and you look at the Netflix models, and one is subscription, the other can be subscription, but there is the option of you accept advertising as the other form of you watching it, with the democratic thing of skipping after 5 seconds if you choose. So those are different options, obviously, because advertisers are just trying to break in. So I guess the question is, we've gone nearly a decade of this direction. Which is the closest to being where it eventually will settle, in your opinion?
So I saw a recent statistic about this whole ad-funded content, where obviously the user or consumer agrees and, kind of opts in to see advertising. And for a lot of the platforms, actually, that's the highest growth area that they will choose. And we've had some interviews even locally.
Hulu in the US?
Hulu, there's Hulu.
Hulu.
Yeah. We've done even some research locally just for millennials and some Gen Zs, just to kind of get a sense of, would you, because personally I don't know why I would
want
opt for ad, but I'm telling you that for content, believe me, that's fine. I will watch advertising because it gives me access to something I want to watch for free. And I think that is more and more, we're seeing some of those models come through. And let's not forget, some of these other platforms also need to find extra ways of making money. And as long as we continue to live in a capitalist system, there would always be a way for advertisers to plug in. However, I think for effectiveness, I honestly think it is better for us to be more integrated or more immersed in that experience. So showing value, adding value, respecting the user, and also kind of respecting them enough to be consumer-centric. Say, what do I know of you? And kind of meeting you there. There's quite a bit of work that has been done in terms of trying to have more personalization. There's a lot more of that, so based on what you watch, where you are, how you behave, this and the other, I tailor my messages, and that is one of the things we all have to get better at. That it's not just one big thing,
running across.
I think that is, a lens that we all kind of need to shed. And the point of saying, oh yes, so I've said it, and I'll wait for another 3 months. That's not the world we're living in, right? And so that consistency and that change, understanding a bit more and changing and tweaking and knowing that nobody knows everything going in. And that learning process as you begin to interact and engage is, where we'll kind of find that balance and we'll thrive as marketing people. But generally, though, I really think it's a great time.
I'm trying not to be scared because the prayer is always like, may you live in interesting times. And in my time, there's been broadcast to streaming, to pandemic, to I don't even know. We don't yet have a Hitler, but I don't know. The streaming, again, in trying to track the changes, it was same at first that what we call the platform is effectively a video on demand library. Kind of.
So to speak, yeah.
Yeah, kind of, that's what we call a library. But streaming kind of, in my view, takes it a few notches higher in that this is now about access to on the basis of first internet access. That allows you to stream. Then if you could stream content, then you could download games and then you could... So streaming has pretty much now brought maybe content of different forms possibly together. So if you were to have a PlayStation, for example, so obviously you download games on it, you could stream your Netflix on it, you could, again, I don't have an answer, but I'm just, as a consumer, trying to look at it like, how much of this can go on? At what point will convergence be necessary? Because there is just way too much. There's some sign up to Amazon, sign on to Netflix. So while I'm trying to track some show on Netflix, there's another thing on Amazon. Okay, all right. Then I'm going to go over there and abandon some Squid Game, or I've got to go to find this new series on Amazon. And there's a whole lot of it. And that doesn't seem likely going to get lower soon. So is there in your view, I don't know if the word is integration or a convergence? Because I think we've kind of talked about it as a need, but is the technology going to make that happen organically at some point in our journey?
So I'm not sure it'll be organic. I think that the bigger players understand the need, for market domination or dominance. And I think that they will at some point come together. Not everybody, but at least find some partnerships to scale. So as an example, you used the example of PlayStation, right? And of course, we spoke about gaming in the beginning. So I'll use the gaming area to kind of answer a bit of your questions. Cool. And off-air, we're talking about Fortnite and talking about, the collaboration with Travis Scott, the concert. And when you talk about brand integrations, you start to see that a bit more in this whole meta world. You start to see even brands like Nike playing in that. We spoke about Burger King earlier as well, even with FIFA and what they did with the club. There's so much going on in that world. And the Burger King example is actually a pretty good example, where they took a club that was, I can't remember the name of the club now, slightly lower end division club, and just sponsored them in real life. And through the game, used that as a way to kind of promote it. And I thought that was genius.
Clever. Very clever.
Yeah, genius. And it's those kinds of things that we as marketers need to find, right? That they're passion points that people already have. And, we just need to go back to what we know and try to convince them and kind of tap into culture, create culture, or partner with culture. So from a convergence point of view, for instance, I think Netflix this year is scheduled to spend about 19 billion, I think, on content creation. That is, I'm thinking, what brand is going to, and this is the point, right? And a lot of the agencies, and this is going to the agencies and brand side, we're seeing the larger networks are also setting up their own, streaming platforms, data companies. And honestly, this is the point. I think the tech companies, so within gaming, if you look at the top 5 biggest companies in gaming, you might be pleasant, or maybe not pleasantly surprised. Because a lot of them are the tech companies. So you have Tencent, which is, big, Chinese one, massive. You have Sony, you have Microsoft. Microsoft, I think is number 2. I'm not even fully sure now. Right? You have Google, because they're the platform, regardless of how much we talk about these other platforms, they are the backbone. They're the platforms. And then, there's a race for cloud gaming and what's going to happen there to be able to play exactly the point of, connected to the internet. I have a smart TV. I have an accessory. I can play, I can watch, I can do all these things. And there's that kind of convergence. To some extent, I do believe that convergence, the people that might end up winning are the back-end platforms. So, for instance, a good example will be Microsoft. Yeah, because of the experts. And then, or you might get to a point where you start seeing some of the, maybe not the TV platforms, but the ones that have that interaction that is in your living, how you live and how you kind of exist. So I think the winners might be there from a convergence point of view. Yeah,
that's my thinking too, when I'm not afraid. But again, the fear is that in the way it's evolving, it just feels like the advertising industry was outside of it. Whereas effectively, it's all about still reaching the consumer. So that's the language of the advertising world too. So at some point it could come together. Your point, I guess, is it wouldn't be in the interruptive way that advertising is designed, which is based on commission and all of those kind of things. And I hear you on that. To then bring it home, Pupsi would prefer Bukola. The Africa internet penetration, we've taken it that it is streaming that is driving this. Streaming is internet-based access. And the internet penetration across Africa is still, I think the word will be poor, So where is Africa, therefore, in terms of this adaptation of what is already happening in the Western world? And I know the millennials, because of the share number, are driving usage in Africa as well. But let's remember, our parents also still exist, and we're still here too. So there is still a journey to them being mainstream in that way. So what, in your opinion, is that journey from the timeline perspective?
So for Africa, I think because we are mobile first and largely mobile only, that is where our advantage lies. The advancements we've seen in mobile in different areas across the continent is, sometimes the stuff of case studies in more developed markets. Sure. And this is not different from that perspective because, for instance, in the video games industry, 52% of revenue in that space is mobile driven, which is driven by Asia. right? And now Africa. So for us looking at that space, there's a lot that we can create. So we'll be more focused on mobile games as an example than, on consoles or PCs or
consoles.
Yeah,
rather.
exactly. And so that is the opportunity that we have as Africans. And because, that is all we have, mobile, we will think in that direction first, which means usually we will gain ground quicker and solve our problems.
You can convert what they already use.
Exactly. And so we're going to see a lot more of that, even in terms of esports. The mobile titles, whether that's PUBG Mobile or Call of Duty, they're starting to, the global data source Newzoo is starting to pick up even Nigerian data, Nigerian players, because they're mobile competitions, which, for all other hosts of reasons, if we played PC competitions for servers, for ping, for infrastructure, we'll be well behind. So I think mobile gives us an advantage to at least play catch up. The devices are fast enough. The telcos are doing well enough. Some of them are starting to carve out certain packages even for streaming or for gaming and so infrastructurally, I think the telcos hold a critical will play a critical role in where we end up landing in for the continent. So I don't think we will be far behind in this world. I also think even audio. I know we haven't spoken a lot about audio here, but audio is a massive thing. Whether that is you're looking
it will make my producer very happy.
Whether you're talking podcasting with the whole Clubhouse and all the new podcasts, but I think even music, right? I was reading an article, I think it was on Forbes or something a few weeks ago, and Audio Mac and what has happened with Audio Mac in Africa and specifically Nigeria, or Spotify or Boomplay that comes with certain types of phones. And I think that the mentality is changing amongst us. We will think, and I use this as an example all the time, when I want to search, I type.
Okay.
When my kids want to search, they talk. Right? That's from a consumer behavioral shift.
Yeah.
I would say, I'm trying to read somebody, I'll design around typing.
Yeah.
I would not really think about audio cues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that for me as a marketer, it's in those kind of moments we need to start to live. There's something I was looking at recently, and they're talking about e-commerce streaming. This is a thing, by the way. When you go on Amazon and you see all those things, it's actually called e-commerce streaming, which honestly I don't remember the billions of dollars the type of industry that one is. But that is the point, is that how do in that moment when you're about to buy or you're about to, what can I show you? How can I package it in a way that you just decide, I'm not going to pick up that one, I'm going to pick up this one. And that is a completely different industry. And the moment we look at the data, we're able to then say, actually, okay, let's not talk generally speaking now. Let's come into those verticals, so shopping, and say how, as marketers, can we play in those spaces from an advertising point of view. And a lot of this, the other side is our clients or brands across the world, well, new to this environment. Even the platforms are somewhat new, and that data is constant. So there's more collaboration also to be expected between agencies, brands and businesses and the tech company or the platforms, so that there's more collaborative work teams and work streams. I think that's the other thing that we're starting to see a lot, or maybe not a lot, but we're starting to see that transition, from take this brief and go and do to what we will do about this.
That time is past. Finally, what about cost, particularly when it comes to the African market? I know you've spoken about it like it's accessible, mobile first, so the penetration can happen, and I suppose is happening, so long as the telecoms keep playing their role. But is cost a factor as well?
So yes, but I would say it from yes and, because here your mobile is not a nice to have, it's a must have, because it fulfills multiple function, primarily one that is of empowerment of economic ability. So you earn through that device. So whilst yes, there's a cost issue related to it, but the alternative is, most people will say, I need data. We've done interviews now because we're doing a series on Nigerianness, and we interview people on the streets, and part of that they say is, the thing I can't do without is my data, and I pay for it because it's what allows me to earn, is what allows me to, it is almost like I don't think people see it as a barrier, right? And of course, there's a lot more work to do in terms of bringing down the cost, but I think because it empowers, people consider it to be good value, and they would use it and do what needs to be done. So I don't think it's as much a limitation. Of course, costs should come down, but I think people, especially young people, find that as a necessity and they use it to its fullest capability.
Tops they skip a meal.
Exactly, tops they skip a meal. And the other thing from a cost perspective is even within the agency and the clients, the business models needs to be rethought. Rethought, because it can't be the same kind of thinking, right? That even needs to change.
Well, one of the reasons I brought Bukola on was to let her make me feel happy about the profession I've chosen, because all these technologies are beginning to do me in, and my head is just asking, like, am I going to be relevant in 20 years in this chosen line of mine? And for sure, she's done a great job of that. Bukola, I'd like to thank you for coming, for letting us benefit from your wealth of knowledge on this subject, for giving us the perspective that in as much as we are in a sea of change, obviously, that we shouldn't take it like the machines are here and then we're all going to get consumed. That is more in our interest for us to embrace it, to recognize what the opportunities are, and to grow our business in that direction, because it just so happened to be the reality. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So for those who want to follow up with me, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Leo Burnett Group. You would get to encounter other things that I do. If they want to reach you, Bukola?
Oh, yeah. I'm also on LinkedIn, Bukola Akingbade, or just any platform at Kucheza Gaming.
Great. So until next time, then, thank you very much.